Between the weekly showcase, Beyond the Hype Train, and all the work I put into the N64 retrospective, I haven't had a lot of time to revisit older games in my collection. Though I like to explore interesting and new games, it's nice to play something familiar every now and then, so I've decided to add a new segment to the schedule. So welcome to what I'm going to be calling BGP Backlogs. What's going to happen in these videos is I'm going to take a game I've already showcased on the channel and give it a full review. So let's kick things off with the first game I ever featured on the channel, Red Steel. In the mid-2000s, Nintendo was making waves with the Wii. While Sony and Microsoft were chasing state-of-the-art graphics and ballooning the price of their consoles as a result, Nintendo opted to focus on new ways to play. This came in the form of motion controls, which really got people talking. The idea of aiming a gun, swinging a sword, and throwing punches with motions as opposed to button inputs was mind-blowing for the time. Nintendo started showcasing various games that would make use of the controls, and one that was of great importance to marketing was Red Steel. This was the era of the Halo killer, so it was important for every console to have an exclusive FPS to push. Microsoft had, well, Halo, and Sony had Resistance. It seemed that Nintendo was looking to have Red Steel fill that part of their release schedule. It seemed like a good fit for the Wii too, as it would demonstrate how first-person shooters and sword fighting would work on the console, not to mention its unique theming. The game would launch alongside the Wii, and would prove to be a commercial success. However, the critical response ended up being missed, and it wasn't long before Red Steel faded from the public eye. In the years that have followed, Red Steel hasn't become a game people talk about much in retrospect, and when they do, they tend to not be too positive. In some respects, okay, most respects, they are right. Red Steel is very much a product of its time, and it wasn't very good when it came out, and it's even worse now. However, I feel Red Steel is more significant than people give it credit for. Though it's not very good, it did lay the groundwork for FPS games on Wii, and it would eventually give us one of its all-time great hidden gems. Thus, I think it's worth taking a look at.
Oh, look at these fish, Scott. Aren't they pretty?
In Red Steel, you take the role of Scott Monroe, an American bodyguard who was hired to protect Mio Sato, the daughter of a wealthy Japanese business tycoon named Aso Sato. Though Scott intended to keep things professional, he found himself drawn to the combination of charming personality and Japanese beauty. Thus, the two fall in love and set up a nice dinner with Sato in order to get his permission to tie the knot. However, on the night of the dinner, Scott learned something concerning about his future father-in-law.
Sato!
Yeah, as it turns out, Sato is a high-ranking member of the Yakuza, a powerful crime syndicate in Japan. Granted, Sato has been trying to steer his organization towards more legitimate business operations, but this has only made him unpopular amongst his men. So on the night of the dinner, a rival gang and members of Sato's own staff turn on him. They attempt to kidnap Sato and Miyu, and though Sato manages to get away, albeit wounded, thanks to Scott's intervention, they get away with Miyu and demand a priceless sword known as the Katana Giri as ransom. Unable to fight, Sato has no choice but to entrust Scott with the sword, and sends it to Japan to sort out the discontent in his organization and rescue his daughter. Weirdly enough, I found myself vibing with the story a little bit. It has a cool East meets West theme, with Scott, an American, having to immerse himself in the culture he is marrying into in order to save the woman he loves. Even when I first played Red Steel, I thought it was a cool concept. And now that I find myself in a similar romantic relationship, I find I can relate to Scott's situation a bit more now. Though I doubt I'm ever going to have to fight some kind of Korean crime syndicate in order to be with Lois. I would if I had to though, so don't push me. The game does get into how intimidating cultural differences can be. When Mio and Sato meet for the first time and instantly start talking in Japanese, a language Scott clearly can't speak. Yeah, I've been there before. Also, before anyone brings it up, I am trying to learn Korean, so go to gi dokchol. That being said, once I put aside my personal feelings for the narrative, I find it's not terribly effective. The characters are bland and forgettable, the pacing can be a little slow, and despite its theme of East meeting West, it leans more towards the eastern side of things. Now, given that the game mostly takes place in Japan, I guess that makes sense, but then I think about other stories with a similar theme, and how they are able to pull it off better. And I think I know why that ends up being the case. It's because Scott Monroe has no character apart from American Bodyguard. Where you're doing a story like this, you really need a strong main character in order to balance things out. Think about the Wolverine storyline where he is in Japan. Though the majority of the story takes place in Japan, Wolverine is so clearly a product of the Western world that the culture clash lands pretty hard. If they have fleshed out Scott's character a little bit more and, actually had him speak, I think the plot would have worked better, but as is, it's just kind of bland.
I saw the girl he brought along with him. Serious Eurasian hottie.
Way out of your league, man. Come on, let's get this over with. They're waiting for their stuff in Warehouse 7.
The presentation is a mixed bag. The game runs on the Unreal 2 engine, and it clearly has its strengths and weaknesses. The best part of the game is the level design, which is pretty well varied. You'll be blasting away through upscale hotels, Japanese bathhouses, chop shops, and factories. It actually does a decent job conveying the idea of East meeting West to some degree, even when the story moves to Japan. There's a decent amount of destructibility in the environments, which made some fun to shoot through. It makes you feel like you're in a John Woo film, which is awesome. That being said, while the theming is great, the graphical fidelity leaves something to be desired. The textures are sloppy and there's some ugly bloom lighting. The character models are pretty bad too. They're super noodly and move like marionettes, and are super unexpressive. This is probably why so many of the cutscenes are done using still images. The sound design is similarly mixed. The guns sound powerful, which is important in a game like this, especially when you're wreaking havoc on the environment. The sounds of swords clashing is great, but actually landing a hit sounds like a wet fart. I'm also not a huge fan of the voice acting. Sometimes it sounds natural, but other times...
Don't let him climb up here! Stop him!
Not so much. I will say this though, the music is awesome, and perfectly fitting of the experience. Overall, it's not the worst looking game I've ever played, but I know the Wii is capable of more than this. Hell, even by the standards of the GameCube, this isn't very good. Getting into the gameplay, Red Steel is a pretty standard point A to point B FPS. You make your way through the levels while gunning down the opposition. It's clearly not trying to innovate in regards to structure, and that's fine. Mostly because Red Steel was innovative in a different respect, its controls. Red Steel was the first FPS to make use of pointer controls, and they work decently well. How it works is you aim with the Wiimote and move with the nunchuck. You can also lock the camera onto enemies, making for easy circle strafing. Now I know there are people who are going to hate these controls because God forbid you use anything other than your thumbs to play a video game, but I think they work just fine. That being said, they do feel a little off to me, which might be because I play a lot of other noteworthy first-person shooters on the console. For starters, aiming feels a little imprecise. In most Wii FPS games, your crosshair is pretty large and hitboxes tend to be generous. In Red Steel, the crosshair is small and the hitboxes are tight. This means that you not only have to be a little more precise with your aiming, but it also means it's really easy to lose track of the reticle and all the action. I would say that the game does go a little overboard with the motion controls as well. Now stuff like aiming, that's fine. It's actually really satisfying to make adjustments with your wrist and watch the gun mimic your movements, but using the nunchuck to open doors or pick up weapons, yeah, that should have been mapped to buttons. This was a mistake that most people made when they made games for the Wii. They thought they had to use the motion controls as much as possible, when in reality, they were best used in ways that added to the experience. Yeah, that meant the motion controls typically were used sparingly, but motion controls were young at the time, so keeping it simple was for the best. Controls aside though, I wouldn't say that Red Steel is that strong in FPS. For starters, the shooting is primarily hit scan with regenerating health. So what it often boils down to is taking pot shots at your enemies and ducking back into the safety of cover when your health gets low. The weapons aren't terribly satisfying either. Though they sound powerful and can do some serious damage to the environment, what they do to the opposition appears to be completely random. Sometimes they go down in 1 or 2 shots, other times you'll be unloading whole clips into them. There also isn't much in the way of hit detection, so they don't really react that much to getting shot. Nothing takes you out of the experience more in an FPS than unloading on an enemy as they rush towards you, and not having them react until the game decides they are dead. The only weapons that really feel like they do a decent amount of damage are the shotguns, which I tried to use as much as possible. The automatic shotgun is especially fun to use. The game also struggles with certain scenarios. I especially hated whenever you had to use a sniper rifle. I don't think they had time to figure out how that one was supposed to work. I'm sure some of you are wondering, isn't there supposed to be some sword fighting here? Well, early on in the game you do get a katana that you can use if anything gets too close, but it just functions as a melee attack. However, every once in a while you will encounter a lone enemy armed with only a sword, which prompts Scott to holster his weapon and draw his own blade.
Why?
Because these are honor battles. Rather than pulling the trigger like a coward, you toss away your gun, draw your katana, and face your opponent on level footing as an honorable warrior would.
Yeah.
Don't give me that bullshit-o nonsense. This isn't a contest in the Ring of Honor, where two warriors agree to terms of combat and proceed to test their skill, strength, and spirit in the knowledge that there can only be one winner. This is war. These guys attempted to kill a man who was trying to change for the better, kidnapped an innocent woman who had nothing to do with any of it, attempted to kill her fiancé when he tried to stop them, and all for a fancy piece of steel that will probably just hang on a wall for all of eternity. I do not care if I give these guys an honorable death. I only care about saving Miyu and making sure I get to piss on their graves. As if the asinine reasoning for these battles wasn't bad enough, the sword fighting kinda sucks. You can slash with your katana by swinging the Wii mode, you can block by swinging the nunchuck, and dodge with the joystick. If you block during an attack, you can throw an enemy off balance, opening them up to an attack. Now this could have made for a good system. It basically turns the game into Punch-Out, but whereas Punch-Out is fun to play due to how inventive your opponents are, in Red Steel it kind of feels like you're fighting the same enemy over and over again. Not helping matters is that the system isn't designed very well. Enemies will attack with light and heavy attacks. You can parry the light attacks, but not heavy attacks. The problem is they don't really telegraph the light attack, so you basically have to block as soon as you see movement. You aren't going to have time to spot the signs that indicate it's a heavy attack. There's typically a pattern that you can pick up on, but it makes the whole thing feel shallow. The sword fights just suck, that's all there is to it. Skyward Sword, this is not. Hell, it's not even Sonic and the Black Knight, and I can't believe I'm praising that game.
You guys, you never know when to give up, do ya? I'll let you live for now. Although the pleasure of watching you die would have been exquisite.
Difficulty-wise, it's not too bad. There are situations where you do get blindsided, but as I said, most of the time you can just hang out and cover. There are times where it can get a little aggravating though, especially in long-range battles. It's hard to see where the opposition is, which is a problem because if they can see you, they can hit you, even if they're only armed with pistols and assault rifles. And God forbid there's a sniper in the mix. These guys can kill you in 2 hits, and when you have a bunch of enemies shooting at you at once, it's unlikely you'll realize the sniper is gunning for you until you get wasted a few times. There are even times where the enemies just appear out of nowhere. Look at this, those guys were not there a second ago. It just feels like there's a lot of artificial difficulty here, not helped by how often sword fighting brings things to a grinding halt. Red Steel clocks in at about 8 to 10 hours, which is my preferred length for this type of game. There is some replay value in going back and trying to earn respect points. You get these by sparing enemies after defeating them in an honor duel, or trying to disarm them, which is more trouble than it's worth, so why bother? Red Steel is a pretty cheap game though. I usually find a copy or two at most game stores, and they never go for more than $10. For that price, I don't think you'd feel ripped off.
Please! You're not going to hurt me, are you? I mean, real men don't fight for girls, right? Hey! Okay. I was just kidding. The geishas are locked in 2 houses near here. That's all I can say. Please, don't hurt me!
Maggots!
Red Steel is far from what I would call a good game. The story is bland, the graphics fail to impress, and the gameplay rarely hits all the right marks. There are so many first-person shooters I would recommend over this. Still, I would give it a very minor recommendation. Though there are better games you can play than this one, it is still influential, at least as far as Wii games go. Just about every FPS on the console will copy its controls, and they would improve upon it. Just goes to show that there is just as much to learn from playing a bad game as there is from playing a good one. Red Steel would also do well enough to get a sequel, creatively titled Red Steel 2, and it's one of the most underrated games on the console. However, that's a story for another time. If you're a fan of FPS games, don't play this. If you're a fan of Wii games, actually just play Red Steel 2. If you're just curious to see the evolution of the FPS on Wii, actually yeah, that's the only reason you should play this one. Then again, if you watch this video you wouldn't need to. Meh, fuck it.
Good point. Fuck it.